Good morning. My name is Ric Murphy, and I am the National Vice President for History for the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. It is truly a profound honor and a privilege to be here this 15th day of this 10th month of the year 2020, a year of consequential events. This year, my presentation is going to be a little different. I usually try to add a little levity and humor here and there, but this year we're going to have a different type of presentation because we're going through some serious times and it calls for a serious conversation. We're living in a consequential moment in American history, and the year of 2020 will be one that most of us will never forget. And as historians and genealogists, we will record this period of time as a profound moment again in American history. But before I begin, there are a few administrative things that I would like to go over before my presentation. First, I would like to thank the overwhelming support that we have received from our sponsors and exhibitors during this critical period. Please make sure that you visit our sponsors and our exhibitors in our virtual expo hall. To our society, bronze, silver, gold sponsors, and to our platinum sponsors, particularly Ancestry.com, Family Search, and MyHeritage, a profound thank you. And to all of our exhibitors, on behalf of our national president and our board of directors, thank you for your continued support. Second, while most of us have been homebound for the last 7 or 8 months because of COVID-19, one of the few pleasures in life that we have is the ability to sit next to a sunny window in a good, comfortable chair and read a good book. This evening at 7 p.m., our International Book Awards Committee, chaired by Jackie Tillman, will bring to each of you this evening some phenomenal award-winning authors in different genres for your reading pleasure. So please, this evening, tune in, sit back, and enjoy a third International AAHGS Book Awards. Immediately afterwards, our National Awards Committee, chaired by Jane Taylor Thomas and co-chaired by Deborah Blocklock Sloan, will provide you with a slate of phenomenal men, women, and organizations with our most prestigious recognition, our national awards, recognizing them for their outstanding work. These are 2 events that I know you will not want to miss. And last, tomorrow evening, we will have a visual treat for each of you to lift your hearts and your spirits. As historians and genealogists, we know firsthand that our future is held within our children. For the first time, AAHGS will be promoting a telethon. We have talented young men and women from the Betu Yetu Dance Troupe from Harlem, New York, who through dance and interpretation will explain our 400-year journey through dance and song. And let me say firsthand, you will not want to miss this. These remarkable young dancers will tell a story of our forgotten history from 1619 to present day, and at the conclusion of their powerful dance, will have a profound message that will absolutely resonate with everyone. So at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, relax in your favorite chair, have your popcorn popped, and enjoy the entertainment of these youth international dancers. And please don't forget to log in and contribute to the future success of this wonderful youth dance troupe. This has certainly been one heck of a year, particularly the last 7 or 8 months. Did you ever think in our young lives that we would one day say that we would wish for the good old days? As a result of COVID-19, we're all wearing masks to protect ourselves and our families. Did you ever think that you'd walk into a bank and everybody would have a mask on, including the bank teller, just to do business? For those of you who don't know me, I'm an educator by training, a businessman by vocation, an author by passion, a historian by curiosity, and a genealogist by birth. but I speak from the heart and soul of my ancestors who came from the belly of slave ships, who sang the songs of Africa as they crossed the Middle Passage and brought their skills and talents to build this great nation. When our ancestors first arrived on these shores, we were not supposed to know their names, nor their accomplishments. But as an organization for 43 years, we have promoted the advancement of genealogical and historical research. We're an organization where AAHGS members such as Catherine Knight and Stephen Wright, two European Americans, were able to trace their African ancestry. We're an organization where luminaries such as LaBrenda Garrett Nelson and Bernice Bennett were able to trace their enslaved ancestries to the plantations of South Carolina and Louisiana, respectively. We're an organization that believes in scholarly research, and where members such as Melvin Collier and Jerome Spears have traced their ancestry to the shores and to their family in Africa. Until recently, our ancestors have been lost and believe that their documentation about them has been discarded. We think that there were those who believed that if we didn't know their names, they wouldn't exist to us. And I guess they felt that if we couldn't see them or know anything about them, we couldn't feel their strength. But nothing could be further from the truth. And those of us within AAHGS, we understand that our ancestors live within us. I stand before you, my brothers and sisters of this great organization, an organization that believes that the history and the blood of our ancestors is to be understood and to be researched and to be recorded in the history books. After all, that's what genealogy is all about. AAHGS family, we know through our research that we come from phenomenal men and women whose free labor built the economic foundation of this great nation. We know that we come from men and women who have advocated and fought for our basic legal rights codified in the Constitution of the United States. And we ask for no more and demand no less. We ask that we the people, be treated no differently than any other, and that we be treated no less than as the founders of this nation envisioned. And as they envisioned, we hold these truths to be true, that all men and women are created equal. These words in our Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution is as important and relevant today as they were 240 years ago. The year 2020 is a consequential year in American history. You will hear me use these words several times this morning, and let me tell you what I mean by that. All of our lives have been changed as a direct result of a worldwide pandemic, a coronavirus known as COVID-19. The economic foundation of our country has been compromised. The foundation of our economy has been shattered with over 15 million people out of work. Thousands upon thousands of men, women, and children stand in line for food. Entire industries and businesses have collapsed. Our healthcare system is on the brink of a potential meltdown. Families have been estranged, and our sick and vulnerable die alone. Now, this isn't the first time our nation has confronted with events of a consequential nature. There have been other events in our young nation's history that have had a profound impact on our citizenry. Our founding fathers revolted from the British Empire to forge a new nation with a basic mantra that all men are created equal. Our nation's original sin, slavery, divided the country on the issue of race, where we fought each other in a civil war. As Americans of African, European, and Native descent, we support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we bear true faith and allegiance to the same. The past year, the past 7 or 8 months, has shown us that we are living in a consequential period in American history, and laid bare for all of us to see that we are not all equal. There can be no better title for this conference and no better title for this presentation this consequential year than The Perfect Storm from 1619 to COVID-19. COVID-19 has shown all of the inequities of our legal system, of our economic and political system, and of our healthcare system. COVID-19 has laid bare the painful truth of these inequities as demonstrated by the unimaginable losses of life within our communities, and the disparate treatment of human life and the inequities of our social and economic welfare. The impact of COVID-19 on health and welfare of families and on our neighbors and communities in which we live has been staggering. What has also been staggering is the losses of national voices who've advocated on our behalf, including the passing of true advocates of our basic and fundamental rights under law. This past 6 months, we lost civil rights stalwarts such as Congressman and civil rights icon John Lewis, Reverend and civil rights activist Cordy Tyndall Vivian, civil rights activist Charles Edwards, and Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Each would all die within months of each other. And don't forget, we lost last October Congressman and civil rights icon Elijah Cummings. And AAHGS family, did you ever think that less famous people such as George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Tamir Rice, just to name a few, that America would come to the realization that the importance of saying their names? And did you ever think that you would live to see a day when the discussion around Black Lives Matter would not only be relegated to the ethnic barbershops and beauty salons, but also to dinner tables all across America? Did you ever think? As a young man, I was civically active, as I am now, and I took to the streets in a peaceful protest for things that I believed in. And because of that, I will admit that over the years, there were occasions when I felt that our young people should have been more civically engaged in social issues. But let me tell you something, AAHGS family. As I sat glued to my television screen the past couple of months, as most of you have been, I can't be any prouder of our young people than I am today. Did you listen to their voices? Have you heard their words? They're bright, they're sharp, they're focused, and they can articulate the challenges and solutions to some of our nation's most complex issues. Parents, you should be proud. You raise them well. Our young people get it, and our future is in good hands. Our young people are clearly a reflection of their ancestors and will continue to persevere and advocate for the equality of our rights. And many of you know that over the years, I've been critical of our athletes for many good reasons. But once again, I'm so proud of our athletes today. They have a platform, and they're using their voices to improve the quality of our lives and the lives of the communities in which they come from. I've got a new hero. I like to talk about my heroes, everyday men and women who go about daily life and they do something that's profound. My new hero is Los Angeles Clippers head coach Doc Rivers. And when Doc Rivers saw the brutal murder of George Floyd, he said, "It's amazing why we keep loving this country and this country does not love us back. And it's just really so sad." What profound words. What a profound statement. Through my historical and genealogical research, I know, and I know many of you come from men and women who arrived on these shores in 1619 and helped to build the economic foundation of this great nation. I know, as many of you do, when our ancestors arrived in Virginia, in the Virginia colony in 1619, it wasn't owned by a country, but the colony was owned by the Virginia Company of London. And it was on the verge of a financial collapse and bankruptcy. But when our ancestors came here, they helped turn around a fledgling economy of the Virginia colony. I know the successes of my ancestors and yours as well, that they succeeded in the land that they came to no other way than as an enslaved people. And for those first arrivals, they were so successful, they would eventually wind up owning thousands and thousands of acres of land collectively. And as we're now learning from the abundance of colonial records that we're beginning to see and research online and in the libraries, that after Bacon's Rebellion, the successes of our ancestors were turned on them and restrictions were enacted, codified, and became the 1705 slave codes, which became the foundation of antebellum slavery in an effort to make sure that no descendant of an African would have such successes. Our ancestors' successes were the foundation of the 1705 slave codes that became the foundation of antebellum slavery. And those same slave codes became the foundation of the Jim Crow laws that most of our ancestors suffered under. I, like most of you, descend from enslaved ancestors who were valued as property and served as the foundation of this nation's monetary system. And when our ancestors were enslaved, their lives were overvalued for their free labor and used as assets to build great wealth for individuals, organizations, and governments. And after the Civil War, their lives of our ancestors were then devalued by society, by laws, and social mores. And that's why Black Lives Matter. Through my historical and genealogical research, I know that I come from a long line of men who fought in every American war. I know my ancestors, like most of yours, they were true patriots. I come from 13 men of African descent who fought in the American Revolution. They believed in the independence from a tyrannical government and fought for those rights of liberty and justice for all. And while the numbers are unclear even today, it is believed that between 10 and 20,000 men of African descent fought in the war for independence. And they believe that all men are created equal and enlisted in a war because they believe that as men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as enshrined in the Declaration found in the National Archives. Like me, many of you have ancestors who patriotically answered the call for duty to this great nation and fought in the Civil War. 200,000 men of African descent fought to preserve the Union and to free the enslaved. And for most of these patriotic veterans, after the war, were relegated to second-class citizenship. In fact, Confederate generals who were responsible for the Civil War and denounced their citizenship to the United States, when they had their citizenship restored, at the same time while denying citizenship to the formerly enslaved. They then put up Confederate statues all across America as African Americans were establishing new rights as equal Americans. These same Confederates, segregationists, put up statues of insurrectionists who fought slavery and wanted to divide the nation. Make no mistake, these statues were initially built as a reminder that it was their intent to keep our ancestors as second-class citizens. These monuments, they were not memorials, but were erected in front of courthouses and other public places for taxpayers, including Black taxpayers who were required to pay for their maintenance. Make no doubt about it. Their intent was clear and was there to intimidate and suppress Black voters and the rights of Black citizenry and serve as statues of white supremacy. And when our forefathers and grandfathers who came from the segregated South were called to patriotically serve in foreign wars to protect the democratic freedoms of others on foreign soil, they once again answered the call. They came from the rural and segregated South. Many of them sacrificed their lives and went into battle so they could be treated like men when they came home, and hopefully would be afforded certain dignities not afforded to others overseas. They came from the South. They went to a foreign land. They fought in a foreign war to liberate foreign people for their liberty. And for many, when they came home after the war, they came back to a segregated, apartheid, Jim Crow South. And to this day, our sons and daughters continue to serve this nation as patriots, and unlike others. And for some, they will make the ultimate sacrifice with their lives. And it's often seen on our TV screens when veterans come home, when our veterans come home, they're treated with disrespect whenever the opportunity presents itself. As my new hero, Doc Rivers, said, it's amazing why we keep loving this country and this country does not love us back. We honor our veterans, all veterans, and we do this because, and make no doubt about it, we love this country. It's the greatest nation on earth. And we love this country because we love our ancestors' workmanship. Our ancestors built this country brick by brick. From 1619 to COVID-19, the foundation of our country was built on the blood, the sweat, and the tears of our ancestors. And we do love their workmanship. This has been one heck of a year. The perfect storm from 1619 to COVID-19. If you're like me, I can't believe that I'm saying this, but after being quarantined for over 6 months, I do yearn for the good old days when families would get together for birthdays and weddings and funerals, for holiday dinners, cookouts. But COVID-19 has taken all of that away from us, where grandparents can't even see newborn grandbabies. COVID-19 has laid bare a truism, and for some, it's hard to say, but we're suffering under a dual pandemic, a global virus, and social racism. Speaking of the good old days, do you remember black and white TV shows like that with June Cleaver and the show called Leave It to Beaver? Do you remember the Donna Reed show? Or even the Brady Bunch? For some Americans, life was so much simpler back in those good old days. And do you remember from TV what life was like in suburban middle-class America and American communities in TV land? Many of us wish for those idyllic moments to be returned. You know what would really be interesting if one of those shows were to show June Cleaver or Donna Reed or Harriet Nelson or Carol Brady of the Brady Bunch, or even Aunt Bee from Mayberry, to say to one of their sons or nephew, don't play with that young black boy down the street because his skin is black and yours is not. Can you imagine what the uproar would have been like if we heard that from one of those TV moms from TV land on TV? Can you imagine what it would have been like if we heard one of those TV moms say you can't play with the black boys down the street because their skin is black, and black skin represents dark, dirty, and represents evil. Now, while I'm using fictionalized TV characters to make a point, we know that they didn't say that, but we know that those incidents happened. In fact, some of you may have had that happen to you where a good friend at some point in time had to stop playing with you because their mother or their father or someone in their family said they couldn't play with you anymore because your skin was black. And had we heard something like that on TV, I'd like to think there would have been a huge outcry from all across America. Now, what would you think if a historical institution or faith-based religious organization or not-for-profit or school did something like that under the guise of a teachable moment? We know it happens all across America. We don't have to be there, but we know it happens. Now, I was fortunate. As a kid, I never had anything like that happen to me. As an adult, I never had anything like that happen to me. Until 2019, on the banks of the James River, the very place my ancestors came to in 1619, when a historical and cultural institution made a statement claiming that it was intended to be a teachable moment. Now, we hear these stories where teachers ask kids, elementary school kids, to hold cotton candy so they can pick the cotton from the candy and eat it, so they would know what it was like for their ancestors to pick cotton. Happens all the time. We've heard stories where Black kids were told to line up on one side of the classroom, and the white kids would line up on the other side of the classroom, and the Black kids were told to run so that the white kids could chase them, so the Black kids would feel the experience of what it was like for their enslaved ancestors to run to freedom, and the white kids would find what it was like to be slave catchers. We hear about those stories all the time. Or the time where honor students, Black honor school students in New York, went on a field trip to a zoo, and the Black honor students were told to stand in front of the cage of the primates so the teacher could take pictures. And later on, when they were all back at school, they told the honors kids, the Black honors kids, that they could do an assignment outside the classroom so the teacher could show those pictures in front of the white kids. Happens all the time. Supposedly, they're teachable moments. We don't need to be there, but we know that these things happen. And again, I was fortunate. It didn't happen to me as a kid, and it didn't happen to me as an adult until 2019, the 400th commemoration of the arrival of my ancestors in 1619 on the shores of the Jamestown River. We know that these events can be traumatic to children, and it can change the trajectory of a young Black boy or a young Black girl's life. We know it's devastating effects on adults. It had a devastating effect on me because I use my voice and I keep telling this story over and over again. At Jamestown Rediscovery's historic Jamestown settlement, I went on a tour with a colleague, and I heard firsthand a tour guide say that the reason we know that the first Africans that arrived in Jamestown were slaves was because their skin was black. He further explained that the English and other Europeans viewed the black skin of Africans as dark, ugly, and represented evil. He further volunteered that the English who worked at Jamestown were indentured servants because their skin was white, representing purity and beauty. And to further this point, he offered a tale of 5 African princesses who noticed the beauty of the white European colonizers, and they wanted to go north so they could be white and become beautiful. When I heard this, I was shocked. My mouth opened wide up. My jaw was frozen. I stood there in amazement. I was so shocked I didn't know what to say for 2 seconds. Now, those of you who were like me and had tonsillitis, you remember how painful they were and what it was like before you had your tonsils taken out. Well, I was down that tour guide's throat in 2 seconds like bad tonsils. Now, I have to take my hat off to our national president, Gene Stevenson, because when he heard of this incident, he and our national board wrote a letter. And we got a response back. Now, what we thought we would get back is a letter that would say that my lying ears didn't hear what I thought I heard. But that wasn't the letter we got back. And what they did, what the organization did, they doubled down. And they said the comments were a direct reference to a 1605 play called The Mask of Blackness. Now, the play, The Mask of Blackness, was sponsored by Anne of Denmark, Queen of King James I of England. Now, I had to look up the play of Mask of Blackness. Never heard of it before. I guess I was culturally robbed of such enlightenment. Now, you should look it up for yourselves and read it for yourselves. The tour guide quotes were actually extracts according to the letter we received, and I quote, "To illustrate the rationalized thinking and negative stereotypes of Africans already existent in early 17th century English society, even before the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in English America." Those words, they're difficult to hear. They were and are ugly and degrading, symptomatic of a form of racism that became persuasive in Europe to justify the inhumane trafficking of African peoples on a massive scale. These beliefs crossed the Atlantic with the colonists and fueled a culture that condemned fellow human beings to the status of a commodity. Racism and discrimination took shape 500 years ago and yet remains a potent challenge to well-being of our society today. Those words were not meant to offend anybody as written in the letter. And now that we brought it to their attention, they will make sure that in the future that everyone there, and when I was there were about 40 people sitting under a big oak tree in a semicircle along the James River, senior citizens, adults, and children. They will make sure that in the future, they understand that those words are repugnant and not supposed to mean anything other than it being a teachable moment. Now, when they doubled down and they said they will make sure that in the future, this is stopped, that this is supposed to be a teachable moment, and you can see the letter here, it's up on social media. Now, I bring this to your attention because this is an example of the embodiment of white privilege. This is why I share this story over and over again. The societal privilege that benefits white people in our society over non-white people, often codified by law and social mores. The Jim Crow, or the segregated neighborhoods of the North, its apartheid-like separation of people based on skin color is exactly why Black lives matter. When COVID-19 struck, it did so without regard to race, religion, creed, or economic status or political affiliation. Today, The United States has more than 8 million cases and more than 415 Americans dead because of COVID-19. COVID-19 has laid bare the barest of facts. The fatality rate for Americans of African descent who come from our communities is more than twice as high as the rate for whites and Asians. It doesn't matter whether you live in a red state or a blue state. These are supposed to be the United States. It's our communities that America's first responders come from. Men and women who serve and protect all Americans. Our neighbors who are now called essential workers. They're doctors, they're nurses, they're medical personnel, they're firemen, they're policemen, they're teachers, they're janitors, they're bus drivers, postal workers, custodians, and cafeteria workers. They serve this nation and make sure that their business and commerce runs every single day. And we now have elevated them and we call them essential workers, because I guess we now realize how essential they are to our daily lives. Since 1619, the workers who come from our communities should have always felt essential and not sacrificial. AAHGS family, we understand that this has been a horrendous year for each of you. Most, if not of all of our AAHGS chapters, have lost loved ones from complications from the coronavirus. Our chapters are located all across the country and located in urban centers and rural communities, all across this great nation. And we have seen the virus firsthand and seen its effects on the very communities in which we live. And our communities, where America's first responders live, we've seen many of them taken from us, along with other loved ones such as our sons and daughters and sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers. And these are the people who go to work every single day to protect America. So AAHGS family, we feel your pain. The virus is deeply personal to us because its impact has been felt the hardest by our communities, by our families, our neighbors, and our friends. It's also our communities that have also been hit hard by the effects of systematic racism. And during this period of COVID-19, our communities have been plagued with another virus, another chilling virus, another deadly virus, systematic racism. And the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, just to name a few, we say their names, we hold them in our hearts, we embrace their memory, we honor their lives, because like so many of our ancestors, they too died at the hands of an apartheid system, a system that discriminates purely on the basis of color and race. Now, let me be perfectly clear, AAHGS family. There is no room in our publicly funded police departments for racist or rogue cops. But let me also be clear. Every day on the job, good cops risk their lives to protect ours. And they fear for their lives, fearing that one of our young boys has a gun and would use it on them. Let's be honest. But in that honesty, our young people don't make those guns. They don't distribute those guns. They don't sell those guns at the wholesale level. They don't market those guns, and they don't control the market as to where those guns go. Those guns don't originate in our communities. America, you know that our communities have been flooded with these guns, and as you know that our communities are flooded with guns for only two reasons: profit and genocide. AAHGS family, I would never suggest nor imply that we should veer from our organizational mission as envisioned by our organizational founders, to preserve African ancestry, family history, genealogy, and cultural diversity by teaching research techniques and disseminating information throughout the community. But as scholars and historians and genealogists, we can't sit by and watch the senseless killing of our young people and the demise of their family legacies. As a genealogist, when I see the genocide of our young, I see a contradiction in what I believe and live for. And to do so is a contradiction in who we profess we are. History and genealogy, when we lose these young lives in America, please don't tell me that you're for life and then act indignant when on the 6 o'clock news you see another round of shootings in another major city, when you know someone is profiting off of the demise of these young boys being shot and cops being shot every single day. Now, you know, some old timers would tell you that the fish with the open mouth gets caught. That's a metaphor to mean that keep your mouth shut, your head hung low, and for many, perhaps for too long, that has worked. But I have a better fish metaphor. If you have a fish tank in the family room or the living room or somewhere down in the basement or in your backyard with a pool in your backyard or the pond down the street or the park a mile away, and when you see a dead fish, it always rots at the top. So my fish metaphor is, if a fish rots at the top, it's time to replace it. So if a police captain doesn't deliver and protect our streets, including getting rid of the guns and arresting the gun traffickers, it's time to get rid of him or her. If the mayor or city council doesn't get rid of them, it's time to get rid of them. If a school superintendent doesn't get rid of teachers who like to show Black kids how it is to pick cotton or show white kids what it's like to chase slaves or show other kids what Black kids look like in front of a cage of primates, if the school superintendent doesn't realize that that's insensitive, someone has to go, either he or the teacher, or she or the teacher. And folks, it's easy to make a change in America today, particularly now, in this day and age, during this period of time, during this consequential moment in American history. We can get rid of our dual pandemics, a coronavirus and systematic racism. Vote. America, we're barraged by Facebook posts and Twitter posts every single day that encourages us not to vote and to encourage voter suppression. Don't choke, vote. And as your national vice president, I can't tell you how to vote, but I can tell you don't choke, vote. And as we hear Black men and see Black men dying in the streets as a result of police brutality and screaming the words, "I can't breathe," don't choke, vote. And we have a chance to overcome 400 years of systematic racism. Don't choke, vote. And we have a chance to correct America's original sin and the residual effect of slavery. Don't choke, vote. And we have to realize that the time has come to honor and celebrate the contributions of our ancestors who built this country brick by brick. Don't choke, vote. And we have to ensure that those who feel our strength don't divide and conquer us over and over again. Don't choke, vote. And we can't be confused by conflicting information over the airways. That's intentional. That's called voter suppression. Don't choke, vote. And don't let these thugs and these folks that make up names for themselves, names of dance groups, succeed. Don't choke, vote. And we must not allow anyone to hide behind systemic and institutional racism by calling it a teachable moment, no matter how innocent the intent. We cannot allow our young people have someone tell them that their skin represents dark, ugly, and represents evil. Don't choke, vote. And those who will say that teaching 1619, a new metaphor for African American history, is trying to change American history, let's be clear. Our history is American history. Don't choke, vote. And let's stop this national bickering back and forth, because if we don't, COVID-19 and systematic racism, if we don't take action to eradicate both of them, we will all mourn each other's loved ones pass away. We cannot allow the passing of our loved ones to pass away anymore. Don't choke, vote. And don't be foolish when someone says to you, you don't need to wear a mask. Don't think you can outrun Rona. That's a dance card that you don't want to play. As historians and genealogists and scholars, stay home and study with Dina. That's spelled DNA. Don't choke, vote. And stop posting and tweeting and complaining. If you don't vote, you don't have a seat at the table and the right to complain. Don't choke, vote. The time has come for us to institute social justice reform and end systematic racism. Let's end COVID-19. Don't choke, vote. In AAHGS family, as historians and genealogists and scholars, there is so much we can do to effectuate change by building our chapters, increasing our membership, impacting our communities, and strengthening the love and passion for African-centered historical and genealogical research as envisioned by our founders. I proposed a plan for our chapter presidents to discuss its relevance at the local level. It's a 12-point plan. Kind of simple. The time has come to forge new partnerships. Because when COVID-19 is over, and it will be over soon, there will be many who will want to come to us and other organizations to develop partnerships and bridges and roads to understanding. We need to forge business relationships with large businesses and small businesses so that they can help you institute educational programs at the chapter level. We need to have community forums where we bring people into our meetings and explain what it means to learn about African American history and African American genealogy. And when we say to people that our ancestors speak to us, we need to help them understand what that means. And when we have authors that write about our people and people from the local communities, we need to bring them in and provide a forum for them to share with us what they learned. We need to engage in school projects. Not what you think. We need to have projects where we get into those schools and find out what the books are that our kids are reading and what's being said about our history. We need to get into those schools and find out what's in the curriculum and whether it includes cotton candy so kids will know what it was like for our ancestors to pick cotton. We've got to research the forgotten history in the communities in which you live, because Americans of African descent have lived in those communities since the 1600s, and their history has been lost. We got to begin to take pictures of then and now. We're losing Black cemeteries, we're losing Black churches, we're losing Black cultural institutions. We got to take those pictures. We have to find out what was there and make sure that we don't lose it and catalog it, because once it's gone, it's gone. We need to create a database of names of who the people were who lived in the communities long ago. Now, most of us, we now know who our ancestors are. And if you got that brick wall, you're probably working on the next 10, 15 minutes trying to climb over that wall. But it's now time for us to branch out in the communities in which we live and help other people find their genealogical roots. We need to research those forgotten families in the communities in which we live, locally and regionally. Find out about their accomplishments. What land did they own? Why did they leave? We've got a model to do that. Marilyn Campbell and 14, 15 chapter presidents from all over the country. We worked on a project with the Netherlands where we researched 172 Americans of African descent who died in the Netherlands during World War II. And we helped them honor them by helping to find their families and bring their lives to the forefront for their forgotten families or families who forgot them. It was such a rewarding project. Let's not let that just be an international project. It needs to be a regional and a local project. We need to engage the community in terms of everything that we believe in terms of African ancestry, historical and genealogical research. As you can see, I'm passionate about my love of scholarly, historical, and genealogical research and promoting the contribution of our ancestors to this great nation and to the communities in which we live. And with our understanding of the perfect storm of 1619, the COVID-19, we will persevere like our ancestors did before us. Now, some of you may have heard that I've chosen not to seek another term as your National Vice President for History. It has been a profound honor to serve each and every one of you. I'm a small guy, but I sincerely hope that I've left a big impact on this organization that I care so much for. And if I can ask one more favor of each and every one of you, don't choke, vote. Thank you, and God bless.